Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how I've done this very small EPP patchwork piece. This is using 1/4 inch squares, and yeah, I'm just going to give you a little run through of how I've done this. I intend to use this just to make like a little decorative little hanging piece, maybe just to put on the wall or just to display on the cabinet. I'm thinking I'm generally going to have it about the size of this tin, so probably 3 times again. So this is actually made using hexiform, so you leave all of the papers, so to speak, but they're not papers, they're like a bit of a 3-dimensional foam, and it actually makes it a lot easier because you haven't got to remove the papers, because the back is a little bit messy, but that's understandable given how small the pieces actually are. So what you'll need is, I use a small pair of scissors for cutting my fabric. I don't use a rotary cutter. So I use Elmer's glue rather than any of the branded ones, just because I find this much cheaper. But what I do make sure I do is I get the small tubes. This isn't the standard Pritt stick one, this is the mini one, whereas the standard one is much bigger, so it's a lot harder to apply. I do use a thimble, but not so much for this, and I use a tiny needle. I think this is a John Innes, I'm not sure what number, but I bought this along with the hexiform from Ashmead Designs. So, oh, there's my needle in that packet there. This is what the hexiform looks like, and it's direct from Ashmead Designs, and it's pre-cut at 1/4 inch, and there's 100 in here, and they're not very expensive really. I bought 2 packs, so this is the pack that I'm using. So what I've decided to do is, I have actually used Liberty Tarnalawn, and I think that is quite an important step, or a tip that I want to give you, because if you tried to use thicker material, then it would be a lot harder to sew and you might distort the shapes, because as you can see here, it's not a straight edge there, and that's because it is very easy to distort the shape when you're wrapping it in the fabric. So if you use thicker material, it might actually distort. And all I've used is some scraps, and I've just been cutting small pieces off this. So what I do to begin with, I work in sets of 4. So I'm going to bring you a little bit closer. I actually pre-choose the 4 that I'm going to use, because any slight difference in the size, it can really throw it out. Now obviously these are laser cut, I assume, or something like that from Ashmead, but they can be a very tiny little hairline difference, which, you know, it's going to be hard to avoid. So in this scenario, I'm going to do 2 pink and 2 of this blue fabric. So I think those are fine. I normally would glue based on the table, but with this I find it easier to do it in hand. So with hexiform, you baste with the fuzzy side towards the fabric. So I just pick it up with my glue stick, slide it off, so you're getting a good amount of glue on there, and just stick it down. Now I generally don't use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I use a little bit less. I don't think I'll get a second piece out of this one, so I'll just cut. Yep. Let me just get my ruler and I'll measure how much that seam allowance is. So that seam allowance is about 1/8 of an inch, if I've read that right. I'm not very good with my inches. And what I actually do is I cut the bulk off the corners, not really close. I should have started with the blue, that would be more contrast. I'll do the blue one next before I speed anything up. And then I know a lot of people put the glue onto the papers, but I always put the glue onto the fabric. So you can see how much glue I've applied, and I gently fold it over. I try to make sure I'm not distorting the shape of the hexiform. And again, just you do get gluey fingers doing this. So you can, it is purple glue, so you can see I'm not putting loads on. And then all I do is I give it a press, and I just look at it to make sure, is it pretty much got all of the 90-degree corners, which I think that is probably as good as we're going to get. So let me do a blue one now so that you can actually maybe see. So again, pick it up with the glue stick, press it in a little bit and slide it off. And can you see how much glue I've put on there? Not loads. There we go. And I know this technique isn't, you know, it's not going to be for everyone. I know not everyone wants to work with tiny pieces, or some people unfortunately aren't able to. But a few people have asked me how I do it, so I thought I'd give you a little tutorial. I'm not too precious about making sure it's all square and perfect, because the back is a mess. Now if you look at this, I would say this one is a little bit wonky, so I don't want to leave that one till last. I'm going to start here because that one's also not great, the seam allowance, and then I'll work my way around. I'm sorry if it's going in and out of focus, that's just because I'm putting my gluing hand in front of the camera. But that one, it's not looking like it's quite at the right angle, so I'm going to turn it over and check and just adjust before I press it into place. There we go. You just give it a press and a squeeze and it will go into place. I'm just going to baste the other two and then I'll show you how I sew them together. Okay, so I've got my 4 pieces here, so they are tiny. So I'm going to thread up my needle now. Now the thread I use is actually machine embroidery thread. I use this because I've got a machine embroidery business and it's very thin and strong to have on hand. On this one you can see my stitches, and after I got like halfway through I thought, wish maybe I'd used maybe more of a bluey colour, but then that might stand out more on the pink. So I think with that light and dark colours it is always going to be a little bit of a struggle. So for a knot I just do the quilter's knot. And I will just trim the tail a little bit. Now when I like making this into a final piece, I'll sort of applique it or put a binding on it so that it gets rid of all the messy edges, so don't worry about that, you'll be able to do the same. So I just get 2 contrasting colours and I just make sure that the sides that I'm going to sew will actually fit. That one looks a little bit, again like I was saying, a hair out, so I just rotate it. Yeah, this one looks a tiny bit rectangular, I don't know if you agree, but it is literally just by such a minute amount. Yeah, I'm right, look, the one is just a touch bigger than the other. I don't know how much of this you can actually make out, so I'm sorry if you can't see a great deal of it. So find the best sides that match, and I have to change the way that I hold my EPP. I have to hold it right here on the edge of my fingers. Sorry, my hands are all dry. And I hold it like that. And with this, I would normally be very particular about making sure I fold back the edge, but I don't mind going through either of those dog ears because it is just going to be on the back. And well, it's difficult to avoid the dog ears because the dog ears cover the whole of the back of the piece. And as you can see, look how big the knot is compared to everything. I'm going to just fold this back just so we can see a little bit easier. And you take in tiny, tiny stitches. That's gone over the knot. And just pull it taut. Again, tiny, tiny stitches. So that's 3 that I've done here. 4, just to give you an idea of how many you need to do. 5. It's just a whip stitch. If you do EPP, it's just the same stitch that you would use. 6. I was readjusting my needles so much then because I wanted to make sure that I was only taking a tiny little nick. 6, and then I'm just going to knot here for the last one. I am sorry, I haven't got the best light for me to be looking. I think it's okay for you. So at the corner, I just do one of those knots where you pass it through. And I pull that tight. And in this instance, I am going to cut it off. And then we'll join it to the other pair. So that's what that one looks like. It is a good idea to give it an iron because this wasn't very flat until I gave it all an iron. So we'll do the other 2 now. Again, just seeing which best fit. I didn't put a knot in this. I don't think I could do it while I'm holding the pieces. Oh, there we go. Nice and knotted. I do have to keep my nails nice and short to be able to do this, because if I have long nails, especially on the thumb, it gets in the way. There we go, we're at the end again, and just give it a little tighten up. And at this point, because we're about to join to the next, I'm not going to cut the thread because I'll just travel across in the back. There we go. Oh. So what we need to do now is match them up in a checkerboard formation. Again, just seeing which best fit. And this side, this one looks a bit bigger, so let's see, does it fit better on this side? If that does happen, you can just have a play around. I don't know if I've basted that correct. Have I basted this? Just have a little feel. It looks like I've basted it against the shape. Let's have another go. I think we can ease it in. Right. So again, I've still got the loose thread. The thread's coming from the centre here, and I'm just going to start here. So don't worry about carrying the threads, just don't cut the threads off to try and tidy the back. Just leave everything there. And you'll see the thread just carries across, and just work across the thread to secure it in place. All I'll do is, because this is our first stitch, I'll just make a knot. See, it can be a bit tricky now because everything's coming really close and it's hard to see where your stitch needs to go, but just use your needle to fold stuff out the way. The trick is, do your stitches a little bit shallower than you usually would, because this isn't going to be used for a quilt. You're probably not even going to put any strain on this fabric once you've sewn it together into your tiny panel, so don't worry about the stitches being shallow, as long as you are catching as much as I am. See, that's probably a little bit deep on that blue. Now we're at the middle, so I'm just going to do a little locking stitch. That's always a good idea to do when you get to any type of junction. And you see there, I have gone through the dog ear. Just try and pull it out of the way a little bit. I hope it's being okay in focus for you. It's obviously quite hard to keep it in focus when you're doing the work so up close. And then in the corner, just pull it to ease it in. There we go. And there we have it, a little 4x4. Isn't that just the cutest? Like I say, it's quite hard to get it 100%. This corner looks a little bit out, but by the time you join it all in, everything else helps pull it all out, so don't worry about that. So what I would do now is I like to do them in sets of 4 and then join them. So if I'm going to join more on here, I'm going to do 3 sets of 4. So I'll do another one here and another one there. I'll join all of those in a singular row here, and then I'll join that row to this. I hope that makes sense. And then when I want to do another row here, I'll do that 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of 4, and then that will just expand it, and before you know it, you've got a quilt for a little mouse. It'd be really good if you make little tiny amigurumis or little tiny toys or dolls. These are perfect little collectible items, aren't they? Because these are such treasures. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If it's not something that you would make, I hope you would at least appreciate the effort that goes into the tiny little EPP pieces. But until I see you again next time, I hope you all get lots of lovely stitching time, and don't forget to leave me a comment if you are going to attempt this. Bye!